Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. Once again, it's James, your host, and I'm very excited about today's guest who's joining me on the show. It's everyone's favorite fourth-generation dairy farmer, the Wizard of Wilson View, TDF Honest Farming, Derrick Josi. Derrick, welcome to Carnivorous Chats, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
Yeah, me too. Derrick, we were chatting offline just before this a second ago, and I just want to, and I say this to all my guests that have had an impact on my journey, and you're no exception. I want to say thank you because, you know, coming from a vegan background, and we'll get into that a little bit, and some of the stuff that I sort of fell victim to that they put out there that is clearly misinformation, and you highlight that in your book, and everyone should know your book, An Industry Worth Fighting For. If you haven't got your copy, make sure you get onto Amazon and support Derrick. It's an amazing read. It really is, and really opened my eyes and really led to me asking you to be on the show today. But I want to say thank you because, you know, I started following you about a year and a half ago on your social media, particularly on Instagram. And it just really opened to my eyes to a lot of the stuff that's out there that is not aligned with what is going on actually in real life. So I really appreciate everything you've done, Derrick, in that space.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I enjoy it. So it makes it a lot easier to do.
Derrick, let's kind of jump into it right from the beginning. Let's, if you can and wouldn't mind giving the folks a little bit of a background on yourself. I did mention that you're a fourth generation dairy farmer. Where are you based out of for folks that don't know, and tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in Tillamook, Oregon. So if you are ever in a supermarket in the United States, you will see Tillamook dairy products. I am one of the member owners. Tillamook is a co-op, and it is owned by the 68 local dairy farm families in Tillamook, Oregon. I am fourth generation. We milk Jersey cows. And if they don't follow my story, anybody that does knows that the last 5 months of my life have been exhausting. We just, over the last 2 years, we built brand new facilities, state of the art, and we brought all the girls up November 15th. And we started milking up here. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. I think it's added more gray hairs to me than the first 40 years of my life did. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'm just a dairy farmer over in Tillamook, Oregon, with a big platform and not afraid to punch back at all the misinformation. You
know, speaking of your platforms, I just remind me and the listeners, how many followers do you have now on Facebook and Instagram, and combined, you're got to be over 1 million or something now, aren't you?
I've got to be close to 1 million if I'm not already there. I believe I'm right at 900,000 on Facebook, on Instagram, 62, I believe is the last time I looked. And then Twitter, I'm right at 20, and YouTube, 13,000. Kind of YouTube is just not my thing.
Why did you feel the need, Derrick, to start all these social media accounts?
It started back in 2016. I think I saw, gosh, what is it? Dairy is Scary. It's a vegan propaganda video, but it's very nuanced in that it takes actual practices that we do on dairy farms and shines it in the worst possible light, like artificial insemination, you know, how horrible it is. When in reality, I posted a video the other day where I bred a cow and she was just standing there watching me do it. And at the end, I actually lean down and she tries to kiss my face. So it just proves the whole idea that it's some sort of rape or something like that, when artificial insemination is so much easier on them than that a bull would do in their natural environment.
Let's talk about that. I think that's important because folks need to understand. What I really wanted to ensure today was that people understand that there really is a ton of, that's it, misinformation put out there against dairy farmers. And I think I sent you one the other day and I was like, they're back at it again, you know, a video put together by those folks. But first of all, like, I think you talk about the down cows and
Mhm.
the issue there. Tell us a little bit about that, and we'll get into a few more after.
Well, down cow is just a general term for a cow that is not feeling well, doesn't want to get up. It can be a wide variety of things, but they try and imply that any down cow we just either send to slaughter or we just get rid of her. And that is just the most ridiculous statement, because each of those cows is way more to me healthy putting milk in the tank than they ever would be being sent to slaughter. Yes, at the end of their productive life, they do go to slaughter, but most down cows, a simple treatment of, some IV fluids, and if there's something underlying going on, treating them will get them healthy and be productive members of the herd again. So it just doesn't even make sense. And then the slaughter side of things, it's illegal to send a cow that is not able to stand on her own and get off the trailer on her own to a slaughter facility. So that is just a bald-faced lie there.
I think a penny really dropped for me, Derrick, in my journey when I was reading in your book, and you just eloquently put it, but replacing cows are more costly than caring for them in your instance. And I was like, that makes total sense, James. Why did you not think this otherwise? They really spent some time and put out these propaganda pieces. And one of the things they also hearken on is this cow-calf separation. Tell us what really happens there, Derrick.
Well, a lot of people have this, they forget that there's kind of two different breeds or types of cattle. There's beef cattle and dairy cattle. You wouldn't catch me trying to take a beef cow's calf away from her, because I know that that's a good way for me to get murdered by a cow. A dairy cow will look at you and go, oh, good, you're taking this calf? Great. Take her to the maternity ward. I don't want to have anything to do with this calf. I equate it as beef cattle are stay-at-home moms and dairy cattle are working moms. Working moms know that their calves they don't know, they're not, that smart, but they, the maternal instinct over centuries has really been bred out of dairy cattle, where it has been a focus for beef cattle, because a lot of them are still calving out on the range where they need to have that protective instinct. So when they try and say that cows and calves cry for days, all the stuff that they say, I've literally done videos where the calf is born, the cow stands up, goes to the feed bunk and is eating, watches me take the calf, goes back and eats. I put the calf away, and everybody's good. I've done videos where our calf pens are literally lined up against the alley where we take the fresh cows to load and bring over to the milking facility. And you watch the cows just walking right by the calves, like, okay. And it's just so easy to disprove this notion that it's just heart-wrenching with simple videos that it's almost laughable.
Derrick, can you just tell the folks, and again, that was another really big sort of moment for me when I realized, that these dairy cows really have been domesticated. And we can get into further about what the day in the life of a cow looks like and how they're become domesticated and what breed specifically. I know you have Jerseys, Holsteins, Guernseys. Do you still do those?
We had Guernseys when I was growing up. There's 7 major breeds of dairy cattle. You name 3. Jerseys, Holsteins, and Guernseys are probably the most prolific, with Holsteins in the United States being the dominant breed. They're at like 85%, and Jerseys are at like 12 or 13%, and then the other 4 breeds take up the rest, and those would be Guernseys, Ayrshires, Brown Swiss, Milky Shorthorn. Oh, and Dutch Belt. That would be 7.
I live in Bermuda, for the listeners that don't know, that end up being some of you, which will be a lot of your fans as well. I live here in Bermuda, so we have to import a ton of stuff. But the few things that we do have here, Derrick, are a couple of dairy farms and then chicken farms for eggs. So I have, since reading your book and learning more, which I love every day, because every day is a learning day in my in my experience. I've walked by one of the dairy farms that's close to my house, and I noticed the way these cows act. And one of the funniest things that I have to ask you about now, what is with the Jerseys and the tongue thing?
They should do scientific studies on it, because I don't know of a Jersey dairy farmer that understands why. It's just something that they just love playing with their tongues. And for a while there, we had a Tongue Out Tuesday marathon going on Instagram, where dairy farmers would just show their cows. And yeah, the Holstein, the Holsteins try their best, but the Jerseys, it really shows you how long a cow tongue is, because it'll be sticking out a foot and a half out. They'll be playing with it. It's just interesting to watch.
Yeah, initially when I was walking by, I thought it was a signal for me to give them some grass or pick some grass. No, they're just it's
exactly it.
It's a funny thing to watch, man. It's really interesting. As we move on sort of into some of the things that are out there that are not necessarily true, the next one that I want to talk on, that was, again, something that was prevalent, was the artificial insemination and why you do it. Is it painful for them? Is it necessary? And then I didn't realize until I read your book, and I have to be honest, and one of the reasons is because cattle can get sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah. So artificial insemination, it's one of the safest procedures you could do on a farm. Cows doesn't harm them at all. And there's so many benefits to it. It allows you to source bull semen from all over the world, realistically. I mean, the genetics in the United States are top notch, but we pull some bulls out of Canada. Occasionally we use ones from Australia, and it allows you to not have to transport, 1,500-pound bull or hunt down a bull who's on farm. And it's so much safer, because not only is there no transmission of diseases, but you're not having a very aggressive bull on your premises. And Jersey bulls are notorious for being angry little bulls that are very aggressive. And then on top of that, you have so many less injuries, because, well, for instance, right now I'm watching on my security feeds, 2 of my cows are in heat and they are riding each other on the feed. A bull would be breeding those cows for up to 12 hours while they're in their heat cycle. And that just opens those cows up to hip damage, being knocked down. Bulls are very aggressive, and you eliminate all that.
Is the process painful for them, Derrick? I don't think not really. No. I mean, it's a quick, when I read your book and understood how quick the process is, I mean, obviously it's not fun for you in any shape or form, but it's relatively quick and painless for the cow herself, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the cows, like I said, I literally, one of my girls was just standing there, and I got it done without her even. She wasn't in a stanchion. She wasn't anything. And when I was all done, she looked back at me like, that was it? What's going on back there?
Let's now move on to some of the other side and just outside of the treatment of the cows themselves. And we'll touch back on that a little bit later as we talk about how the day in the life of the cow, some of the other stuff that's out in terms of going against the grain, so to speak, of, the dairy industry. And that's things like water usage and waste. I know you've invested a lot of time and money to upgrade your facilities in that regard, Derrick. Talk to us about specifically the water usage. I did not realize the amount of recycling that you do in terms of your facility for the cows themselves. Can you highlight that for the listeners?
For example, with water, all our milk goes through a chilling process. Because milk comes out of the cow at roughly 102 degrees, and it has to be cooled down to 35 degrees within minutes, if possible, before it goes in the milk silo. So one of the ways we do that, it goes through basically like a radiator with water on one side and the milk going through, and it cools down the milk really quickly. And that water, you have a 15,000-gallon water tank right outside where the chiller is. That water goes into there every milking. We collect it, and that is what we put into all our water troughs. So we're cooling our milk without having to use a whole lot of electricity. It's going into the water troughs, and then from there, the girls drink it, producing milk, which, in the milk tank, but it also comes out in their urine, and then we collect all the manure and all the urine, and we store that, and we put it on our crops, which we grow for our girls. So that's 3 times that water's been used. And a lot of the times they'll use this large number for how many gallons of water it takes for a pound of hamburger or whatever it is. And they won't tell you that the vast majority of that is rainwater. Like 90 something percent of the water they factor is rainwater that's falling out on pastures, in cropland, that whether we fed the cow or not, that water isn't being wasted.
Give us, and again, I just want to say thank you, because if folks understood a day in the life of a dairy farmer, they'd understand that these times that you're up at, and to just have an hour of your time is very precious. And I'm very aware of that. So talk to us about a day in your life, Derrick, from start to finish.
Yeah. So I am up at 2:20 in the morning, grab my coffee. I come over. First thing I do is I look at our activity monitoring system on the computer. All our girls have collars that keeps track of rumination, how active they are, how long they're at the feed bunk every day, how long they're laying down. Imagine a Fitbit, but for dairy cattle. It gives us cows that it has flagged as being not active enough. And so I will put them on the list to sort so that we can visually inspect them, make sure that they're doing okay. And it gives us cows that are in heat, so we'll sort them to breed. I do that first thing, 3 a.m. in the morning. And then I jump into my feed truck and I start feeding my 800 cows. In the new facilities, it's nice because it's a lot closer to my feed loading areas. So it takes about 2 hours to feed all 800 cows. My feed truck, for people that don't follow me, is basically it's got a huge blender on the back. So we have a nutritionist that sends me rations depending on the stage of lactation for a cow. So if a cow has just had a calf and is heavy in milk, she's going to get a much higher diet, higher energy diet, because she is just pouring so much energy into making milk. Whereas a cow that is at the end of her lactation and is putting weight on for when she calves in, she's going to get a different ration, because we don't actually want dairy cattle to put on too much weight, because get too heavy when they calve in, there's a lot of metabolic issues that can happen. Much like any pregnant woman will tell you that their doctor wants them to monitor their weight. Touchy subject, that's all I'm going to say. So I get those fed, and then usually between about 5:30 and 7, I'm back up, well, my office where I'm at, going through things. We go through the hospital pen, which I've actually been talking with the guys while I've been talking to you, where any cow that has mastitis or any of that stuff, they come in at the end of milking because their milk is separated and it is not put in the tank, because obviously all milk is free of antibiotics. It's tested, completely safe. So let's dispel that myth too. So we go through them, we check, see how they're recovering, and then after that, I usually go home and eat breakfast with my wife and my kids, get them to school, come back, and start my second shift, basically, of whatever we've got going on. Like today, we are going to be applying liquid manure to some grasslands, because our grass is starting to really take off, and getting a shot of nitrogen in there is going to make it really pop. So we have a great first harvest of grass. And I will hopefully get an hour and a half nap in sometime today. I can only survive on coffee for so long. Then at 2, I'm back over here doing the same computer stuff. In the afternoon, we go through the same process, and by 6:30 at night, I'm usually home.
A very long day and well-deserved rest for sure. Derrick, just on that one point that you talked about, that's a big one, because one of the main things that people were throwing out there, that milk is filled with pus and antibiotics. But the reality is that prophylactically, you only give antibiotics when a cow is sick. And if the cow is on antibiotics, I understand from learning from you, is that milk is then separated at the time of milking, correct?
Yeah, any cow, and you have detailed records at any time, because we actually have third-party inspections too, where I have to show my antibiotic use. I have to show my documentation and my records. So it's all on the computer. Click a couple mouse clicks and I can print off a detailed report of what we've done with each cow. Every cow has a history on her card on the computer that goes back as far as as long as she's been alive. She's had documentation of any time she's been treated, anything that's gone on with her, every hoof trimming, just, ladies got to have their feet done. Everything is there. It's extremely detailed. They have RFID tags in their ears, so I can scan it and I can bring all the information up on my phone, on my tablet. Heck, I can get it wherever I'm at. Technology is a great thing.
Yeah, I've been, sort of following along, as I said, for the last year and a bit now, and seen some of the technological stuff that you've advanced with. And as you often say, that the aim at the end of the day is to make a profit, to be able to help the families that are working for you, to then hopefully lower the cost to the consumer through technological advances. With that being said, and we'll get into a few of those cool things at the end, like the rotary and the alley sweepers, which are really cool. Just going back just a little bit to a couple of other quote unquote misnomers in this space. This whole sustainability issue, organic and regenerative. I really like your thoughts on this because, as I say, every day is a learning day, and there's a lot of stuff out there now that makes the consumer think that when they're paying more for this stuff, that the regular dairy farmers aren't doing these sort of things. But the reality is that dairy farmers and farmers in general are constantly striving to make your products cheaper for you with technology and things like that. But you do rely on the earth and the raw materials, so you have to take care of the environment, don't you?
There's a great example of this is they seem to think that if we are a for-profit business, that somehow makes us bad or evil, whereas sustainability has to be viewed as profitable, because if I'm not taking care of that land and my environment, I can't grow the crops I can't do the things I need to do to provide for my cows, which means I have to spend more money bringing outside resources in, which makes me less profitable. That evil word, profit, that I strive to be profitable, makes me want to do right by my environment, makes me want to utilize my land to its fullest, but also with the idea that I'm going to be running and doing this for the next 40 years of my life. So I have to do it in a way that isn't just profitable for this season or next season. No, if 4 more generations of my family want to be dairy farmers, I want this land to be as profitable and productive and sustainable for them as it is for us today.
It just makes good sense, and dollars.
Yeah, and it's no different with cows. Oh, you're just in it for the profit. Yes, and the best profit I can make is having happy, healthy cows, because happy, healthy cows produce more milk, ergo making me more money. So this idea that I'm going to be out there abusing my cows and not feeding them right and not taking care of them, I'm either really dumb or I like making money, but those two can't be the same, because the cows literally pay everything. They are what makes this farm work. So if I was not taking care of the cows, I wouldn't be a dairy farmer for very long.
There's a lot of stuff out there about methane emissions and cow farts these days and contributing to the ozone. And, there was a great chapter in your book too, but I watched this investment you made in your infrastructure, Derrick, and how you dispose of your waste. And then I read and listened to you online and other podcasts talking about how larger farms will invest into producing waste into fertilizer. Have you gotten to that stage yet? I couldn't remember.
Almost there. I've got to build one more barn, and then I'm going to be doing compost on all my separated manure solids, which is phenomenal for soil health. So it will help build organic matter back in the soil for farmers that don't have animals to help do that. They'll be able to bring in compost. I've got somebody looking at bringing some of it in as we speak, because it just will make soil more fertile and it holds moisture better. Anyway, I could get off on that topic so long. And the larger farms, because you know everybody hears that I have 800 cows or that I'm going to go up to 1,000 cows, and they think, "Wow, you're a huge farm." In the grand scheme of things, no, I'm still one of the small players. I've been on farms where they have 10, 15, 20,000 cows, and they are phenomenal facilities because, you know, it still goes back to the cows pay the bills, and they have methane digesters. They're collecting the methane and turning it into natural gas. They're powering their facilities. In some areas, they have, you know, solar panels up on their roofs, because why wouldn't you? That's a huge space, and put them up there. It's farmers in general have always been good stewards of the land and tried their best. We always got it right. Of course not. We've screwed up just like anybody else has. But the other thing is, I don't know how cows became the scapegoat for all the methane in the environment. When Dr. Frank Mitloner, anybody that sees his work understands that the cow's methane cycle is a big loop. Cows eat the crops. They produce methane. Methane goes up for roughly 10 years, breaks down, comes back down. The crops absorb the broken down methane. I'm not a scientist. I can't remember exactly what it breaks down into, so don't hate on me for that. And then the cows eat it again. It's a closed loop cycle. It's not adding any new methane in there. Whereas, you know, there's methane coming off of gas lines. There's methane. Rice paddies are a huge contributor to methane, and all these swamps and all the wetlands that we are trying to put back in everywhere, huge contributors. The Amazon puts off more methane than anywhere else in the world, I believe, and that's just a natural cycle. So as it's putting off methane, anyway, methane, it's a big scapegoat for, you know, the fuel industry to blame cattle.
It sure is, Derrick. And recently I had on Jane Buxton, who is the author of a book called The Great Plant-Based Con. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but
I haven't, but I'm going to have to look it up.
Amazing book. And for a dairy farmer, it would be well worth your read, because she talks a lot about how cows have become the scapegoat in the terms of this process, and how the number that the activists are throwing out there is severely overstated by orders of magnitude. And her whole book is backed up with research. She's an incredible author based in the UK, but well worth the read. We've sort of talked about a day in the life of the dairy farmer, Derrick, and I'd like to move into the other side. And what was really interesting to me in following you is watching your ladies and just a day in their lives and understanding what they're like. And we've talked about how the breeds have become sort of, quote unquote, a little bit more domesticated, but they really live a pretty good life with you. Talk to us about their day, and they're frolicking now, as you mentioned.
On our farm, and basically any farm, you know, obviously facilities are different, protocols are going to be different, but a dairy cow, they basically work for 20 minutes a day. And by work, they get on my rotary. We attach a machine as they go around. They get milked, they back off, and they go back out to their free stalls, where they have a buffet line where they can eat whenever they want. And then they have free stalls that they can lay in, and we are constantly cleaning up after them, because cows are the ultimate 2-year-olds. They go to the bathroom where they want, when they want. They just do their thing. They relax out in the barns. During the summer, the curtains are open. We have nice breeze in. During the winter, we pull them back up so that water, we get a lot of water until they stay warm and dry. They have auto scrapers in the barns that clean their alleys between their stalls 12 times a day. I mean, I'm not going to say the floors are clean. As soon as that scraper goes through, you're guaranteed to have a cow go to the bathroom right after. And somebody actually asked me, why is it green in there? Well, cow manure is green, so all the concrete gets a nice, healthy green stain on it. Yeah, a cow's life is 20 minutes of work, and the rest of the time they're just hanging out.
What I never realized before, and I guess I should have been more observant, but cows almost have a power down mode standing up. And you had a hilarious chapter in your book that really brought me back to or not chapter, but hilarious part in your book, where you talked about the old fallacy of cow tipping. And I can tell you my own story, Derrick, when we were kids and the dairy farm exactly where this house is. Went out late one night, and my friend dared me, and I didn't make it too far because I slipped and fell in all the dung in the middle of the night. So it wasn't very successful, I can tell you that much.
I will have to admit, I did take friends out and have them try, and they had a similar experience. It always ends up with you finding a cow pie out there and falling. It's, I mean, as domesticated as they are, cows are still prey animals, and their sense of smell is phenomenal. So is their hearing. And cows actually have really good night vision, and they almost see in 360 degrees. So interesting side note. Anytime you see a cow path, the reason it meanders is because cows can't see right behind them. And if they move their head just a little bit, their whole spine does that. So they're checking for predators behind them constantly. And so that's why they meander, so that they can see their one blind spot behind them.
Like I said before, every day's a learning day. Never knew that.
I learned that a couple years ago. I'd always been like, why? Why do girls not just walk in a straight line? And then somebody.
Now we've talked about a day in the life of you, the farmer. We've talked about the day in the life of the cow. Let's talk about the cycle, a day in the life of milk, and just sort of put to bed some myths around the freshness of milk, what happens when the cow is milked, and people dumping out milk that's bad. Let's talk about how when the ladies are milked, what happens next.
Milk is actually one of the freshest things you will find at a store. Most milk that's in a bottle is at the store within 2 days. On our farm, as soon as that milk hits the machine, it never touches the can. It goes through stainless steel pipes, through the chiller, into our milk silo, and it's there within minutes. It's cooled down to 35 degrees. We have a milk truck that comes every day, picks up our milk, and takes it 3.5 miles to the Tillamook plant here in Tillamook, where it goes into a milk silo there, takes a sample from our silo. They also take another sample at the plant. They run a sample to test for somatic cell, protein, fat, all the things in there, and antibiotics. If it were to come back hot, as in test positive for antibiotics, not only would they dump my whole silo of milk, which if it's full, it's 10,000 gallons. Any other milk that is mixed with my milk would also be dumped, and I would get charged for all of it. That's a lot of money. And it's definitely not worth the risk of, oh, this cow, we're just going to put her in the tank. So there's definitely no antibiotics. No, nobody's going to run that risk. Once it's at the plant, depending on if it's a cheese plant or milk bottling facility, we'll just go with milk bottling, because cheeses, there's just so many different cheeses, ways and things they do with milk with those. But at a bottling factory, you are either going to have regular pasteurization, and I don't remember the exact temperatures they heat milk to. So regular pasteurization is a lower temperature. So that's your normal milk you're seeing at the store. And that's why the refrigeration and the expiration date is much shorter. Some plants it goes through the ultra processing, I think that's it, where they heat it to a much higher temperature and actually makes it shelf stable. So you can have milk outside of a refrigerated unit, and it makes it shelf life much longer. So from farm to store for a bottle of milk is most likely 1 day, 2 at the most. And ironically, it's probably one of the most local and locally sourced foods you can find, because in the United States, or even where you're at, there's usually a dairy farm or two close enough to every metropolitan area that you're buying milk that is within 100 miles of. That's the most ironic thing. Everybody talks about, buy local. And if you're buying milk anywhere, you're buying something that is.
Bermuda has a couple of small dairy farms, as I mentioned, but the reality is, because we're such a small island, we're only 21 square miles with about 60,000 people clinging to a rock out here in the middle of the Atlantic. So we do have to import some dairy now too, to be able to suffice, Primarily the government, supports the local dairy farmers, and rightly so, and says, okay, if you guys can't meet the demand, then we'll supplement with foreign milk. But yeah, I totally agree. You know, a couple of other things that are interesting to me, Derrick, is there's always that one that the milk gets watered down for skim milk. That does not happen, does it?
No, they just I should have gone through that process. That's what Holsteins are. That's a joke for my Holstein dairy.
I got that one quick.
Yeah, so Holsteins have a lower butter, fat, and protein content. Jerseys have a much richer milk because they have much higher butter, fat, and protein and milk solids. So when milk goes to a bottling plant, it's all commingled, and they will standardize it by making sure it has the same amount of butter, fat, or protein in it. And the way they get skim milk is they just take some of the butter, fat out. Well, with skim milk, they're taking all the fat out, which is why skim milk tastes like water, because they're taking all the deliciousness out of the milk. Don't drink skim milk. That's silly.
One thing else, you know, just right on that subject, Derrick, is that I also never realized that parentheses whole milk is actually 97% fat free.
Yeah.
And you guys are regulated by law to call it whole milk in that regard. So you have to really kind of be learned in this to understand, right?
Well, yeah. People are like, well, what do you mean 2%? Is it only 2% milk? No, it's 2% fat in that milk. Yeah, it's very frustrating because it's a very healthy product. I mean, 97 or 98% fat free. We can't advertise it that way because we're regulated by the government, and you can't advertise it as a healthy product like that, which is insane to me that we aren't allowed to tout that. Like, even with whole milk, you're getting all sorts of essential vitamins, nutrients in there with a very low fat content when you put it into that perspective.
I want to touch very quickly while we're here, Derrick, on something that's really big in the carnivore community, in the really burgeoning dairy community, and that is something that you also touch on in your book, and that is raw milk. What are your thoughts on raw milk?
My thoughts on raw milk is I'm very libertarian. And if you want to drink raw milk, I don't feel like the government should tell you not to, but I think you should go into it well-versed in what raw milk is and what it isn't. It is not some magical food that is going to cure all your ills. And I think you can get a lot of the same benefits just by drinking non-homogenized milk. There's a reason we pasteurize a lot of foods, including orange juices and things like that, which you also get that is unpasteurized, but it just takes a lot of the risks out. Pasteurization. It only takes you getting really sick once to realize that, okay, raw milk does have its dangers. Like, for example, my milk, I would not have any issue with my milk silo taking a big cup and drinking it because, well, for one thing, I'm in the same environment as my cows. So any pathogens that could be in that milk, I'm exposed to all day, every day. Whereas somebody that isn't around it, there could be something in there that might make you sick. It might also not make you sick. And raw milk is delicious. So I think if you source your raw milk, you've gone to where the raw milk is, the dairy that's providing it, have a good relationship with them, see their cleaning procedures, because it doesn't take long if the facilities aren't keeping milking areas clean for bacteria to grow, because milk is a great incubator for material. That's why we cool it down as fast as we do, because the longer it stays warm, the more bacteria you're going to have it. I could go on and on this, but the gist of it is, raw milk. It could get you very sick. It's not the magical thing that everybody thinks it is. Go find a dairy that's doing pasteurization and not homogenization. You're going to find all the same stuff. Pasteurization isn't destroying. I mean, we cook steak. We cook everything else, and pasteurization is basically just cooking the milk to make sure that you're not going to get a bad pathogen.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your perspective as someone that's an expert in the area.
Yeah, you know, I get where they're coming from with not wanting to promote raw milk. There is definitely some dangers. But on the flip side of it, back when they started pasteurization, we didn't have the refrigeration we do have now. We didn't have the stainless steel. They were still taking milk in milk cans to places. Is raw milk much safer now than it was 50 years ago? Absolutely. Just have a much better understanding. But if I was your normal person living in a suburban or not a rural community on a dairy, I'd be safe. I'd feel safer just finding the non-homogenized that's still pasteurized.
It sort of leads nicely into a chapter that you talk about in your book. And again, one of the things that is so flagrantly put out there as something that we shouldn't do is, as humans, should we be drinking the milk from another animal?
Oh, this one always gets me. Because I see what their argument is. It's like, yeah, okay, but why shouldn't? It's a great nutrient, great source of nutrients. A lot of people have actually the ability to digest it still. So why not? Our bodies have been specifically designed over the centuries and decades to be able to do it. I don't. That's like saying, well, we aren't designed to live in cities either. We're supposed to be out foraging and fighting for our lives out in the wild, but we created environments that are better for us. Shouldn't be going to a supermarket to get stuff either. It's just such a weird concept to me to think that that is an argument. Like dogs and cats in the wild wouldn't be drinking milk, but if you provide it to them, they don't have a problem drinking it. We're the only species that's been smart enough to harvest milk from another animal.
There was a great, speaking of podcasts, that I listened to just yesterday. Was it the World Dairy Forum and the Oatly experience that you had? And
oh yeah,
it was really interesting because I didn't realize. Now I know, again, through talking to Jane and what's happening in the UK, that Oatly got asked to step down or back off on the sort of the stuff they were putting out there by the government. But also Canada and Europe have, they label their non-milk products. I'm trying to be politically correct here. They can't call them milks, and they clearly do not sell as well when they're not called milks. That's what I understood, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a ton of research on this, that the Oatlys of the world and the other brands over in Europe and in Canada, their sales are way less than they are here in the United States, where they can call themselves milk. And honestly, there's legislation that's already been passed into law that, if it was being enforced, wouldn't allow them to do that here. Oatly is probably one of my favorites because they bash animal agriculture so hard, and yet all the byproducts from their making of oat milk, oat beverage, are fed to pigs in the UK and the Northeast. So they're bashing animal agriculture and telling us how horrible it is for the environment, when they actually know themselves that animal agriculture makes their product more sustainable. Very hypocritical and very dishonest.
Yeah, and from listening to you, you had, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you had been invited to participate in something that they wanted to put out, but very astutely, you thought, well, what is the end game here? What are they trying to do? And ultimately, as you said, it could have been to spark something that they could then use at a later date to show something bad against real dairy farmers, correct?
A mission to study on the history of dairy in the United States is what it was.
Mm.
And the producers were like, oh no, it's going to be very, and I was like, okay, who's funding you? And they're like, well, it's Oatly. And I said, I'm sorry, but I am not going to be associated with anything that is funded by Oatly. I don't trust that company. I will not touch this with a 10-foot. Not even gonna. They're like, okay, we understand where you're coming from. And the latest was they were at World Dairy Expo with a crew trying to interview farmers. And I'm not sure why an oat beverage company spends so much time trying to talk to dairy farmers, unless it's to get something that can be used to trade dairy farmers. It's less than ideal or less than responsible.
On that point, Derrick, you said something else that was very interesting. You know, I had always assumed, and that's my bad, that it was the plethora of plant-based milks in the market that had caused the dairy industry to see a sort of decline. But in actual fact, what you've said is that bottled water and sugary drinks have had a much greater impact on the dairy industry. And it just speaks to the whole mess that our metabolic health is in.
And part of it also is that, you know, when's the last time you saw any innovation in what milk looked like at the store? Honestly, it's probably Fairlife was the last one, and they took off like amazing. It's an amazing success story showing that no, dairy is not in decline. We just need to actually make products that consumers are looking for. A lot of people aren't looking to buy a gallon of milk, but they want single serving drinks. They want things that fit into their lifestyle. They aren't sitting at home having a huge bowl of cereal and putting milk in it. No, they're going to need it for other things. And that is our fault for not providing a product that people actually want. And I think we've started to really emphasize that. Like there's a new sports drink based off of milk that I was just listening to a podcast about this that's starting to roll out. And part of the it's clear. It looks like a sports drink, but it's I don't want to say waste product. It's a side product from making cheese. I believe it's a whey protein fluid that they've turned into a sports drink. And so they take all of the, let's say most of the protein out because they wanted the electrolytes and the fluids that are in the milk. And so they are putting the protein, well, because like back to Fairlife, Fairlife is a higher protein milk. They take some of the fat out and they put more protein in. So they're able to use what's left over to make this new sports drink, which is healthier than your Gatorades and things like that, and packs more nutritional value. So things like that, which are innovative and smart and will capture market share. Whereas, oh, look, we've got a gallon of milk.
You've spent a lot of time, a lot of money in investing in infrastructure this past couple of years. And from talking to you today, and hopefully the listeners get your book, will understand the reasons why that you're doing this. What's next for you, Derrick? I understand from listening to you and on a bunch of stuff that you're maybe thinking of a visitor center, something like that for folks eventually.
Yeah. I already have my viewing area for the parlor. It sits up second story, so you get to watch the cows walk in, do their thing, leave. We have to buy a house or build a house. It's a little further away from the dairy because I want to build a visitor center, and I would like a little privacy. Right now, we're about 200 yards from the existing facilities, and got young kids, so we want to have a little bit of privacy and protection from, well, I mean, I get a lot of angry death threats, stupid things, threats to take my children, steal my children. So just a little insulation. But yeah, I want to build a visitor center. I want to have a meat market in there. I want to have an ice cream counter. I want to have a coffee shop in there. apparel, and then I want people to be able to just go out, check out the cows in the freestyle barns, just see that, oh, these are really nice. They're relaxed. They're just chilling. They're jerseys. They're going to come bother you, right? Try and lick you to death. And then be able to walk up, watch the cows being milked. Yeah, so that's my next adventure. Just why not? We live once, so let's just do everything.
And on that note, Derrick, I just want to say, I was so excited personally. I think I sent you a picture that, Tillamook products made it all the way here to Bermuda, the cheeses, which is phenomenal. Think of the reach of that, all the way from Oregon, all the way out in here in the middle of the Atlantic. I got the Tillamook cheeses here in Bermuda and was excited to try them, and they were absolutely delicious.
Hopefully you get our ice cream eventually.
I am pushing the distributor to get the ice cream because I really want to try it. And when you open up your visitor center, I'll tell you, I'll be trucking over to Oregon to come check you out and say hi in person. Derrick Josi, this has been an absolute honor, a privilege talking with you. I really can't thank you enough. I know what hour it is for you and how important your rest is. Derrick, where can folks find you online that want to come follow you?
You can find me at TDF Honest Farming on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and then just at Derrick Josi on Twitter.
Derrick, thank you so much again, my friend. Get some well-deserved rest before the second half of your day here. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.